Despite the bleak outlook, there may be a solution on the horizon. House Democrats have been quietly working on a different option, using an arcane rule called a discharge petition, where lawmakers could call a bill to the floor without the approval of the Speaker. But there's a catch. They need 5 Republicans to get on board. Joining me now, California Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. He's a member of the House Ethics Committee and a former member of the Rules Committee. Congressman, thank you for coming to the Saturday show. For the uninitiated, what is a discharge petition and what is the viability of what you're proposing?
Well, first, thank you, Jonathan, for having me on. I really appreciate it. Without going into the whole details, it's a vehicle, it's a bill that would allow the members, a majority of the members, to sign the petition to go around leadership. And leadership right now, Speaker McCarthy won't bring or may not be willing to bring a bill to the floor that will raise the debt ceilings and avoid all the consequences you just mentioned. So this is a way for us to present an option for a majority of the members of the House.
Right. So as I mentioned in the intro, you need 5 Republicans to make your plan work, to get that discharge petition out. Have you had any conversations with Republicans about signing on?
Well, I work with my Republican colleagues. I have friendships with many of them. We've discussed this and some of the things that are going on in their caucus. I think that there are 5. Unfortunately, there's a lot of pressure on them to do what the most extreme members of their caucus want them to do, which I think they want the country to go through this and default on our full faith and credit.
One of the weaknesses for everyone is the calendar. There's not much time left. Are people anticipating a short-term deal? Or, to pick up on what you just mentioned a moment ago, are there people, maybe way too many people on the other side of the aisle, who are willing to let our economic raft go over the cliff?
I don't know, Jonathan. I never thought that we'd be in this position. I never thought I'd watch the Republican caucus at the beginning of this session go through 15 votes in 5 days to select a leader. You covered all that. That was a few Republicans leveraging their caucus to go through that. So I don't know. It's incomprehensible to me that they put the country through this.
You know, Secretary Yellen warned that the United States could run out of borrowing authority on or around June 1st. Republicans, as you know, have expressed skepticism about her warning. Are there no grown-ups in the House GOP who see the gravity of the situation?
No, there are. Personally, I think if this vote for my bill to just raise it cleanly was a secret ballot, like we all vote for in elections, there'd be plenty of Republicans. But they're intimidated by the far right and their funders for independent expenditures when they run for primary, is my view.
Mm-hmm. Well, could you do this by secret ballot?
No, not according to the rules that we have. And that would require the Speaker to change those rules, or at least the process. And as you say, we don't have time. What accelerated this for me, for us, was Secretary Yellen's warning of how close we are.
You know, President Biden, in his interview with Stephanie Ruhle, when she asked him about the 14th Amendment, much to my surprise, he didn't take it off the table. Were you surprised by that? And do you think that the 14th Amendment is another viable option?
I wasn't surprised. President Biden's doing a great job on this. We're working with the administration. We have to keep all options on. As you referred in the lead into this interview, these are dire consequences. This is not something we're making up to scare people. This is what people like the Treasury Department, Moody's Analytics, Brookings, all these independent nonpartisan groups, or many nonpartisan, have made these the numbers you just gave us.
You know, one of the questions now that's come up compared to when we went through this in 2011 is the role of Wall Street. Back in 2011, Wall Street was all over Capitol Hill by phone and in person, warning of the dire consequences of default. Do you see the same kind of activity now from Wall Street? Does Wall Street think that a default is possible?
I don't think they have the same kind of influence in the Republican Party. The old traditional David Brooks, your colleague on the news hours, that right of conservative, pro-business group. That's not what the Republican Party is anymore. As President Biden alluded to, it's not your father's Republican Party. These are very, very, not all of them. That's what we're counting on. We're counting on the responsible ones. But unfortunately, right now, the leadership is leveraged by these very extreme ideologues.
Republicans had no problem adding to the national debt and raising the debt ceiling without conditions to pay for it all under Donald Trump. How do they square their obstinate stance now?
It's unbelievable. Hypocrisy would be a kind word to say to it. As you just said, they were willing to do it under the former president. And that a lot of that was driven by $1 trillion cut to the top 1% in their taxes.
That's right. That is absolutely right. California Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, member of the House Ethics Committee, thank you very much. All hail King Charles III, a day of history and regalia as Britain crowns a new monarch for the first time in 70 years. King Charles's coronation was only the second televised coronation in British history. While today's choir was beautiful and diverse, it was also a clear acknowledgement of how the Crown is handling the current backlash from some of its subjects. Citizens of the Commonwealth's current and former colonies are calling for a reckoning and an acknowledgement of the country's part in atrocities against enslaved and indigenous people. Indeed, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Joining me now, Henry Bonsu, presenter for the Times Radio, the sister station of the Times of London. Henry, thank you very much for coming to the Saturday show. You know, we Americans fought a war to break away from Great Britain, and yet millions of Americans watched the coronation today. What do you think accounts for America's fascination with the British royal family?
Well, America is, in modern terms, a fairly recent invention. We're going back about 240 or so years. Whereas if you consider the history of what you saw today, going back to 1066, William the Conqueror, and before even that, we're talking about conquest, repulsion against invasion, absorption of people from different cultures, and of course, yes, the trafficking of human beings and the colonization. And then what we have today, the Commonwealth, which is one of the reasons why the present king, the new king, was so keen to present a different face from the one his mother and the courtiers around her presented to what was still an empire back in 1953.
So since the 18th century, African abolitionists have asked the monarchy to apologize for its role in the slave trade. The Guardian notes that the paper trail of Crown involvement is extensive. A Time magazine piece gives King Charles credit for opening the Windsor archives to aid independent research. Henry, talk about the significance of this move and whether it will ultimately lead to a formal apology from the king.
I think if King Charles, and indeed his son, the Prince of Wales, William, had their own way, they would do this. They have adopted language of profound regret. Of course, we saw King Charles do this when Barbados became a republic at the end of 2021. And then when William made his ill-fated trip to Jamaica last year, he expressed a similar sentiment. But of course, it's not just their way. They are constitutional monarchs, not absolute monarchs. So you've got the Prime Minister, you've got the whole establishment, you've got the House of Commons and the House of Lords, you've got lawyers, people advising them not to go any further than that. And that's one of the reasons why I think we're going to inch slowly but surely towards this position. But make no mistake, people are demanding it louder and louder. We're going to see Jamaica break free and become a republic probably next year, Belize as well, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. But the reckoning is coming. People will not be denied.
And that gets to the next question I was going to ask you, because the death of Queen Elizabeth II brought a renewed focus on the Commonwealth and whether it would survive her passing. So how will King Charles respond if/when those Commonwealth nations you just mentioned announce their intentions to break away?
He will accept it. He's a pragmatist. Let's remember, this is a man who has had many years to prepare for this. His most famous creation is the Princess Trust, which is nearly 50 years old. It's helped many, many young people, particularly of African and Caribbean origin. People like Stormzy, the rapper, Idris Elba, the actor, to get into their careers and develop a business. And he's traveled around the world. He knows what people think. Let's remember, his prime minister is not someone like Churchill. It's somebody of South Asian, Indian origin, who was reading from St. Paul to the Colossians today in church. And one of the reasons why he had a woman of African origin, African Caribbean origin also, carrying the scepter and the rod. These are the symbols of his power and also the anointment by God, as it were. And also you had representatives of some of the great faiths, the Abrahamic faiths, of course, the Jewish faith, the Muslim faith, the Christian faith, also the Catholic faith, the Buddhist faith, all represented, all presenting to him. That wouldn't have happened some years ago, but it was his wish that it should, because he knows, indeed you said, heavy is the head that wears a crown. As William Shakespeare wrote some 400 or so years ago in King Henry IV, Part 2. And when that crown, which was fashioned in 1661, was placed on his head, all 2.5 kilograms of it, and he sat in that chair that was created in 1300, you could see his features crumple, and he felt the weight of history on his head and on his shoulders. He knows.
And real quickly, Henry, we were getting reports here in the United States that enthusiasm for this coronation wasn't as big as some had anticipated. You're there. Are the reports true?
Right. It depends on the age group you talked about. If you talk about people who are 75 and over, the vast majority of them still love the king, they love the queen, they still remember the war years, and for them, it is the embodiment of the nation that shall not be shaken. Younger people, millennials, they are not so sure. Many of them are still sore over the way they feel Harry and Meghan are treated. They think much more about ethics, about value, about the environment. They want to see change if this is to survive.
That is it. See, we only have 30 seconds left. We're going to have you back because I'm fascinated that the millennials and the younger people are mad at the royals for how they treated Harry and Meghan. But we're going to have to save that for another time. Henry Bonsu, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on the Saturday show.
Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan.
Next, 5 p.m. tomorrow to decide whether he will testify, with closing arguments set to begin on Monday. The writer has accused Trump of sexually assaulting her in a department store dressing room in the 1990s. On Friday, video of Trump's October deposition was released. Not only did he repeatedly deny the allegations, but he also defended his comments in the infamous Access Hollywood tape. Listen to this.
In this video, I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
Joining me now, Barbara McQuaid, MSNBC legal analyst, former U.S. attorney in Michigan, and law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. Barbara, thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry. This is only the second time I have heard that soundbite from Trump's deposition. How damaging was that, or is that?
I think it's devastating to his case. He affirms the sentiments that he made in that recording. There are 1,000 ways you can deflect that recording. You can say it was an offensive and ill-advised joke. You could say we were just puffing, it was just locker room talk, all of these kinds of things. But not only did he repeat it, he defended it and said, yes, he's the kind of person who is entitled to this sort of behavior. So I think it's devastating and damaging. And it appears to be a rare moment of candor for Donald Trump. But I think it certainly supports the claims of E. Jean Carroll.
The defense didn't present any witnesses, but now the judge has allowed Trump this window to testify, given his comments in Scotland a few days ago. Would you advise him to testify? And do you think he will testify?
No and no. I think that Trump may have just as he said he wanted to talk with Robert Mueller, he couldn't wait, but these lawyers, were making it difficult. I think he wants to create the appearance of wanting to tell his side of the story, but I don't think he will. One, I think if you're his lawyer, it's akin to legal malpractice to put him on the stand. He is so incapable of telling the truth and answering questions, and as we just heard, answering them in ways that might be helpful to his case. I think the other is he's just made a strategic decision here. He'd rather lose this case than expose himself for all of his misconduct. And if he takes the stand, it opens him up to all kinds of cross-examination about his propensity for untruthfulness. And so you could cross-examine about every lie he's ever made. I don't think we have the time from now to kingdom come to go through all of that. So I think he'd rather take his lumps, pay whatever is the judgment here, and then forever proclaim that this was a show trial and it was unfair and how much the judge and the jury were out to get him. I think strategically, long-term, he probably assesses that that's in his best interest.
We only saw a snippet. We showed a snippet of Trump's deposition being questioned by E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, Robbie Kaplan. But has the jury seen the entire deposition tape?
No, but they have played excerpts, but I think that the challenge, of course, is that the plaintiff has the burden of proof, but it's only preponderance of the evidence. It is not guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, as we say in other cases. We know, based on the defamatory statement that's been introduced into evidence, that Trump denies these allegations. He says it never happened. That is his position in the case. So the jury has that information. And it is the plaintiff's burden to prove and to overcome that. And you never know what a jury might do. But from my perspective of this case, we've seen not only the testimony of E. Jean Carroll, but we have two witnesses to whom she made contemporaneous statements at the time about this. And we have other women who said he did the exact same thing to her, to them, as well as that Access Hollywood tape. And so to me, the plaintiffs have, E. Jean Carroll has put forward a very compelling case. And absent, a juror aberration, I don't see how she doesn't prevail in this case.
Barbara, let's turn our attention to Fulton County DA Fani Willis's investigation down there in Georgia. Prosecutors say at least 8 of the so-called fake electors have accepted immunity deals. Why is that significant?
Yes, I think that's very important because, the fake electors are people who have information that could be valuable to the prosecution. To date, there were 16 in Georgia. They had all been told that they were potential targets of indictment for signing on to these false slates, saying that they were the bona fide electors for the state of Georgia. But they know what they were told, and they know what perhaps part of the scheme was. And so having those people as witnesses instead of defendants is of greater value to Fani Willis. I mean, she could prosecute them, she could convict them perhaps if the evidence was there, but they are far more useful to her working her way up the chain. And the fact that she's given them immunity suggests that they have information of value. Prosecutors are told not to take a pig in a poke. That is, don't buy livestock before you've had a chance to see it. And so typically that requires a proffer about what is it these people have to say or some knowledge about the potential testimony. So I don't think she would be giving them immunity unless she thought they had some valuable information to share. And so perhaps it is about the directions they received, intent to defraud, whatever that is, it is likely they have testimony that can implicate others who are higher up in the scheme.
All right, we've got a minute left, and I'm going to cram in 2 questions in one. This week, 4 members of the Proud Boys, including the founder, Enrique Tarrio, were convicted of seditious conspiracy in connection with the January 6th insurrection. That conviction is rare. 1, what impact might that have on Special Counsel Jack Smith's sweeping investigation? And then the second question is, Jack Smith sat in on Mike Pence's testimony before the January 6th grand jury. Why would he do that?
So number one, yes, very important, especially the conviction of Enrique Tarrio, who was not physically present at the Capitol. I think that should embolden Jack Smith to consider charging other people, even if they were not at the Capitol. And 2, why would he sit and listen to that testimony? I think because they see it as pivotal, and he wanted to hear it firsthand. Hearing the inflections in the voice and the body language can be more important than reading the word on the page. And so it strikes me as he found that important to any charging decision he might make down the road.
All right, Barbara McQuaid, thank you very much, as always, for coming to the Saturday. Correspondent on The Daily Show, who headlined last week's White House Correspondents' Dinner, started out as a reporter. But his journalism career almost didn't happen after a brush with the law left him on probation and unhireable in many newsrooms due to his criminal record. In a Washington Post interview with Wes Lowery, he says, "I'm not here to deny the mistakes that I made, but they do show me how few people in this country believe in the concept of forgiveness." Roy Wood Jr.'s experience is far from unique. 1 in 3 adults in America has been arrested by the age of 23, and reintegrating as a productive member of society can be difficult when a criminal record bars you from entry. I sat down for an exclusive interview with singer, songwriter, producer, and activist John Legend and Sheena Mead, CEO of the Clean Slate Initiative, about their new documentary, Home Free, on Amazon Prime, that puts a human face on this issue. John, thank you very much for coming to the show.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So we're talking about folks who were formerly incarcerated or folks who just got caught up in the criminal justice system and what happens to them after they get out. There are so many barriers for folks just to lead normal lives.
Yes.
Why is this an issue that is so important to you?
Well, I think if we think about safety, if we think about the kind of society we want to live in, where everybody has an opportunity to thrive, to take care of their families, to participate in democracy, to participate in the economy, we're putting too many barriers in front of way too many people. To put it in perspective, 1 in 3 people have either an arrest record or have been incarcerated in some way or another. That's either in our jails or our prisons. And so if you're excluding 1 in 3 Americans from opportunity to participate in society, or if you're putting undue barriers in front of them because of one mistake they've made in their lives, then you're really reducing the potential of the whole country. We have so many people out there who want to contribute, so many people who want to participate in the economy and the democracy, and if you're excluding them, you're weakening society by doing that.
After spending 30 years behind bars, you have no medical insurance, you have no place to live, no job. Freedom is not the way that I always thought it would be.
So, Sheena, you and John are part of this movie, Home Free, on Prime Video. There was something you said in the movie that really hit me, and that was, because of stigma, you didn't even try to go as a chaperone on your kids' class trip. Talk about that and how that factors into the overall topic that's in Home Free.
Yeah, you know, after my arrest and my conviction, I thought that chapter of my life was closed when I had paid off that check that had bounced. And years later, I was on my way to, I was invited to take my child to SeaWorld to chaperone, which want to be engaged with my children's school educational curriculum. And when I went to do the application, it had asked me, have you ever been arrested? It was in these big letters. And at that moment, I didn't know if I checked that box, was my child going to be labeled, stigmatized, what I would have to go through, how I was going to be denied. And I took that moment to just be like, you know what, I'd rather not, because of the stigma that was attached to it. So that really impacted the way I engaged in my children's school on those trips that were asking those questions.
Mm-hmm. And John, you mentioned earlier, like 1 in 3 Americans have an arrest record, from arrest to all the way through conviction. In Home Free, you talk about the fact that your mom has spent time in jail.
Yeah, and I have multiple family members that have, and what actually really raised this issue to me was when someone else in my family approached me about it, and they were talking about how hard it was for them to start a business, how hard it was for them to find housing, how hard it was for them to do so many things. And we want them to be able to contribute to our family, contribute to their community, contribute to society, but society keeps telling them no and putting all these barriers in front of them, and we're depriving ourselves of their ingenuity, their drive, their entrepreneurship, and we're depriving them of the chance to become contributing members of society. It's hurting everybody. So we need to do a better job of opening doors rather than putting barriers in people's way.
You are the CEO. Yes, you are the CEO of Clean Slate Initiative. This gets to the 48,000 legal barriers there are for the formerly incarcerated, just anyone pulled into the criminal justice system. What exactly does the Clean Slate Initiative do? What's the goal?
Yes. So the goal of the Clean Slate Initiative is There are over 30 million people that are eligible today to get their record sealed or expunged. But we make it so hard. And I believe that America is a nation of second chances because we do have laws on the books that allow us to get our record cleared. But it's so bureaucratic, full of red tape. Whether you got to wait 10 years to get your record cleared, whether you got to pay hundreds of dollars per offense, whether you have to take off work, what we do is we shift the burden from the person who made the mistake to the system that traps them in that mistake. And we streamline that process by automating record clearance. So once you are eligible, your record's automatically cleared. You can move on.
How many states have already done what you want them to do? 10
states have already enacted clean slate laws. We have 6 states that we've had help, and there are many more states that are on the pathway to do record clearing. Right now, we have a plan to go to all 50 states, get them on a pathway to impact 14 million people, to unlock second chances from 14 million people.
The great thing, John, about Home Free is not just that you and Sheena are in it, but there are, I think, at least 4 other people who literally span the rainbow of the American people. Why? Was it telling just real individual stories? Is that the way you want to, or you hope to change minds about this issue?
Well, I believe great art and great film content, the power of it is to humanize us, to help us see each other's humanity, and connect beyond the facts and figures, beyond the laws, beyond all of the narratives that tell us we should see each other as the other, see each other as foreign in some way. Like, we're all human beings, and we all should be seen for our individuality, our humanity, and for our story. And I feel like this film helps tell some really great human stories. So we put real faces, real lives behind the laws we're trying to get changed, behind the box that we talk so much about. See the humanity behind that.
When I first came home, I knew that, there were going to be some barriers that were on the other side of that release date. I knew that I was smart enough to be able to go do anything that I wanted to do, especially at the entry level. And so I walked out with this kind of sort of this gumption, this level of this audacity. And then they would say no because of this felony conviction. And I was like, all right, cool, I get it. I knew people would want to say no when I applied for the job at the shoe store. But now let's go, walk down the hall and go apply for the job at this other t-shirt store. And I'll apply there and they're like, oh, no, you don't hire people with felony convictions either. And that became a trend. It was a constant reminder that I still have a felony tattooed on my chest.
I travel around the country, and I've heard multiple times from people saying my true sentence did not start until I came home. And what that means is, listen, I did my time, I paid my debt, but when I came home, I wanted to start a new leaf of life. But I was barred from employment. I was barred from housing. I was barred from even just getting education and knowledge. And we know that 94% of employers, 90% of landlords, and 72% of colleges and universities use background checks to screen out applicants. And that's what they mean. I'm already at the bottom trying to get my life back together. And why are you still making it so hard for me to move on?
What do you hope people take away from it? And more importantly, what do you hope people will do as a result of seeing it?
I hope people take away not the pain that people are sharing in the movie as well, but the promises that they're sharing as well. Showing that people can move on, they can do great things. I mean, everyone in that movie is doing great things now because they was afforded a second chance. They're able to move forward. And I hope that people will make second chances a normal conversation at their dinner table amongst their peers. That is not something that is looked down on. And what I like about the film, that it's highlighting the good that is happening, because there's so many media, news, not just news, but like stories and crime series of crime that's actually scaring our communities more.
Yes.
But we're not lifting up the great things that people are doing when they're given a second chance. And so I'm great that we have a vehicle to share stories like myself, like people in the movie, and also folks who are amplifying this work like John Legend, who's been a great partner and activist around this work.
And I think sometimes we get so caught up in public safety narrative and crime going up during the pandemic that people think, well, their instinct is always we should be tougher. And when they say tougher, they don't just mean getting people on the punishment side, but they want to continue that punishment beyond their incarceration into the time when they're supposed to be coming home and trying to reintegrate themselves back into society. We need to resist that urge to be more punitive. We need to encourage people to be more open-minded, more graceful, more forgiving, and it's better for all of us if we reintegrate people with an arrest record. We'd be missing out on Sheena Mead if we did not integrate people back into society and give them opportunities to lead. She's leading a national organization that's doing huge things with a massive budget. And if we would exclude people like her from opportunity, we'd all be missing out. And I want to encourage people to see that opportunity, see that potential, and embrace it.
Sheena Mead, John Legend, thank you both very much for coming to the show.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
You too. Again, thank you to Sheena Mead, her first national television interview, and John Legend. By the way, that interview took place at the Milken Global Conference in the lobby of the Beverly Hilton Hotel. Restrictions in Title 42 expiring on Thursday. The Biden administration is bracing for a surge in crossings at the southern border. The Defense Department will be deploying 1,500 troops to the border to help Customs and Border Patrol as it grapples with the swell of migrants. NBC News reports, quote, the troops would be active duty, not National Guard, and they would not be armed. They would not use force or make arrests, but they would support Border Patrol as needed. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas was in Texas on Thursday and Friday, where he warned of, quote, consequences to migrants who arrive at the border irregularly after Title 42 ends next week. Joining me now, Illinois Congresswoman Delia Ramirez, vice-ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee. Congresswoman, thank you for coming to the Saturday show. Just want to get some clarification. The 1,500 troops at the border will be in uniform, but they will not be armed, and they have no law enforcement function. So what have you heard from the Biden administration about the role of those troops then on the southern border?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on. I'd say what we've heard is that they're going to help and assist with some of the processing. And yes, to your point, that they won't be carrying guns. They will be providing assistance to border protection. So the challenge, though, is that they'll still be in uniforms, right? And in many ways, I think it just adds to, for asylum seekers, this idea of militarizing the border. And those are some of those challenges that we're working through. We want to make sure that if we're going to have them there, that they're helping provide food and shelter, but that they're not adding to the enforcement. And sometimes just uniform itself, I'll tell you, here in Illinois, we've talked about the National Guard being here in Illinois when the first bus came, that just the uniform itself can oftentimes be additional fear and trauma to people who have been crossing and have been out the other side for 2 months.
Now, you have personal experience navigating the immigration system in America. 40 years ago, your family crossed the border from Guatemala while your mother was pregnant with you. How has your personal experience shaped the way you view immigrants seeking asylum today?
Look, I'm really clear why people cross. My mother actually crossed the same exact border that 2 weeks ago as a vice-ranking member of Homeland Security I went to visit. This time with the committee, that same border where my mom nearly died in the Rio Grande. I grew up hearing my mother retell the story of crossing 1,811 miles through desert and nearly died in the Rio Grande because that was the only option for survival for her. I'm clear, Jonathan, that every single person that is crossing in between the port, some of them are nearly dying or dying in that water or dying from dehydration. They're not doing it because, it just seems to be nicer on the other side. They're risking life or death because they have no other option. And we're a country of us, that has always talked about being a sanctuary to those seeking asylum. Having to wait for weeks on the other side of the border while your tents are being burned on the other side, that desperation will make people do absolutely anything to survive, not just for themselves, but to the children that they're carrying with them.
And yet, during a press conference in Texas, Secretary Mayorkas reiterated that, quote, the border is not open, it has not been open, and it will not be open after May 11th. What do you make of the Secretary's statements?
The border has never been open. And I know that Republicans continue to say that. Look, I was in a 19-hour markup in Homeland Security Committee, hearing them go off, on and on and on. We have an infestation, we have an invasion, and we have open borders. We don't have open borders. If we had open borders, people wouldn't be dying. If we were having open borders, people wouldn't be crossing through different ports of entry. If we had open borders, people wouldn't be getting processed. I saw women in holding cells. Look, I remember as we were walking through and doing the review of the detention facilities, a woman ran to the window and she put her hands up and whispered to me, "Help me." That woman was detained. That's not an open border. She was detained. So he's right. We don't have open borders. We're not going to have open borders, but we do have an opportunity to show compassion, show protection, and show that we are a country that will help those seeking asylum. Some walking through jungles from Venezuela, some like my mother, fleeing deep poverty, nearly death in their own country. And that's what we're going to. We're not saying we're having open borders. What we're saying is we have to be able to ensure that this country continues to do what we were founded to be, which is a country that is open to supporting those that are seeking asylum. We've done it before. We must continue to be that country.
Congressman, is it fair to say that the secretary made those very strong comments not so much as a reaction to Republican criticism, but to send a signal to migrants to sort of counter the disinformation that they might be getting in their home countries about how easy it is to not only get to the United States, but to cross over into the United States?
I honestly think it may have been for both. I think, one, to the narrative, to the people that have been lying and saying to the American people, those borders are out of control, absolutely out of control, and they're open.